Hi, my name is Autumn Dickson, and this week is June 22nd through the 28th of the Come Follow Me program associated with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And this week we are studying 2 Samuel, chapters 11 through 12, and 1 Kings, chapters 3, 6 through 9, and 11. So this week we are learning a little bit about Solomon's reign. Solomon was known for his wisdom, which was a gift that came to him as he was ascending the throne. He asked the Lord specifically for that gift, and he received it. One of the stories that really highlights Solomon's wisdom is the story of two women and a baby, and the two women were fighting over the baby. In the last post, we talked about how the Lord reflected Solomon's heart back to him. And this week, we get to read about how Solomon imitated the Lord. He imitated the Lord in reflecting the hearts of these women. And so I want to give you a quick refresher on this story. So there's two women, they live in the same home, and they both had babies around the same time. One of those women rolled over onto her baby, and the baby died. And in the night, she went and switched her dead baby with the other woman's live baby. The other woman wakes up in the morning, recognizes that the dead child next to her is not hers, and they go before Solomon, and they're fighting over the baby who is alive. Here is how Solomon responds. This is 1 Kings chapter 3, verses 24 through 25. And the king said, "Bring me a sword." And they brought a sword before the king. And the king said, "Divide the living child in two and give half to the one and half to the other." The lying mother, the one who had accidentally killed her child, she wanted the baby cut in half. And the true mother was like, "Please stop." Like, she offered to allow her son to go to this other woman as long as he was alive. She just wanted him to live. And from this experience, Solomon was able to see their hearts and give the baby to the true mother. He was able to protect the baby. And this is a really cool story, and people are like, this is so cool. It shows Solomon's wisdom and all this stuff. But I want you to think about this from a first-person standpoint of this poor mother, the true mother of the live child. I want you to imagine what she was feeling in the middle of this nightmare. And I'm not just talking about she was so scared. If I were her, I feel like I would have also been looking at Solomon like, what? Excuse me? I thought you were wise? Like, why? Why is this the route that you're going? Like, this is insane. And as I was picturing this lovely mother's reaction to this experience, it made me realize that that is how we react sometimes to the Lord when he makes a decision in our lives. Sometimes we turn to the Lord and we're like, what? Excuse me? I thought you were wise? Like, why are we doing this? As I have gone throughout my life, and specifically as I've gone throughout sharing my testimony online, I have garnered a testimony. It's been layer upon layer. I've garnered a testimony that the Lord loves me, that he is making decisions very carefully about how he interferes in my life, that he is wise, he knows what he's doing. I have come to know this. I believe it. I have drawn so much comfort from this specific testimony that he loves me and he knows what he's doing in my life. And yet, despite this testimony, I have also learned that there are limits to this testimony that need to be expanded. So when certain events will crop up in my life, for example, when I got pregnant 3 months after having a baby, I had a testimony of the Lord. I trusted him. I loved him. And yet, despite this desire to trust him in this specific experience, despite the fact that I wanted to trust him, what I was really feeling was fear and betrayal and being powerless. That's really what I felt. Even though logically I had that testimony, I knew he had been there for me, I knew who he was, that's how I felt. I can only imagine that this woman was absolutely terrified when Solomon recommended cutting the baby in half. He was a king, she was a harlot. I think she knew what it was like to really feel powerless, to have someone else making decisions in her life. I bet you she knew more than most what it means to have someone making decisions in your life regardless of how it's going to affect you. Solomon was the king and he did have the power, but the decision that he made, despite the fear that it put into her heart, Solomon wasn't trying to torture her. Like, his purpose wasn't to scare her or hurt her. He was making the decisions very specifically on purpose. He wasn't rash or ridiculous. He was extremely intentional in making this decision. Now, he's just a mortal man, right? We're looking at the story of Solomon. We're also looking at it as a parable of the Lord in our lives, right? This woman is like, you're crazy. What decisions are you making? And sometimes the Lord makes decisions in our life and we're like, you're crazy. What are you doing? And so we're going to have a little bit of discrepancy, right? Because we've got Solomon, who's the mortal man, and we've got the Lord, who is perfect and omniscient. So Solomon is a mortal man, and he had wisdom. He had wisdom given to him to discern the hearts of the people in his kingdom. And he sent this trial to discern the hearts of the women, to bring their hearts up to the surface where they could be observed so that he could make a good decision. That was his purpose. He did it very intentionally. He wasn't trying to torture the poor woman. He needed to reveal their hearts. The Lord knows our hearts, but he still tests them. He still sends trials. Just like Solomon sent this trial to reveal their hearts, the Lord sends trials. And the more I think about these principles and observe them, the more I'm convinced he's not doing it for himself because he already knows our hearts. He's doing it for us. He's doing it for our benefit. And I talked about this a little bit in my last post, that the Lord will often reflect our heart back to us. Solomon needed to be able to bring their hearts up, see their hearts so that he could judge well. He was wise, but he didn't know them perfectly. He was not omniscient like the Lord. He needed to see their hearts. The Lord had a different purpose and a similar method. His purpose was not to bring our hearts to the surface so he could judge whether we're good people. His purpose was to bring our hearts to the surface so that we could see our hearts, even though his method was similar in sending trials. I want to give a more specific example of this so you can understand what I'm trying to say. When I say that the Lord is trying to reflect our hearts back to us, when he sends a test or a trial, it is to bring our hearts to the surface and not only see whether or not we believe him, but also to highlight the boundaries of our testimony, to show us where our holes in our testimony are so that we can expand those boundaries and fill those holes to the point where we know and we can feel it and it comforts us and uplifts us. So going back to my previous example of when I got pregnant, 3 months after having a baby, I felt extremely betrayed. We had talked about this and I needed a break. I am miserable when I am pregnant. I am in a very dark state of mind when I'm pregnant, and it felt like I was going to be pregnant for a year and a half with very little reprieve in the middle. And I learned, because of this trial that he sent, just like Solomon sent a trial to these women, the Lord sent this trial, or in the very least allowed it to happen, when this occurred. And I looked at the Lord like, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing this to me? I saw so clearly the limits of my testimony. I saw where the holes were. And because I was able to see those boundaries, because my heart was brought up to the surface where I could observe it, I could work on those boundaries and expand them. When this woman first was standing before Solomon and he was like, cut the baby in half, she obviously had likely a very visceral reaction to this initial fear and distress. But interestingly enough, after the experience, I bet she gained a testimony of Saul's wisdom. In the end, she knew that he wasn't crazy, that he was a good king who was seeking very, very intently to see the hearts of these women. How was he supposed to know which woman was telling the truth? There was no one who could have known. There was no way to know. And in the moment when he says, cut the baby in half, they're like, what are you doing? But he was being purposeful. And by the end of this experience, the woman knew that. She knew what Solomon, like why Solomon did it. She knew who Solomon was. Now, could this experience have gone poorly? Yes, like it could have failed. They both could have pled for his life. But we're talking about this story for Solomon, but we are also talking about it as a parable for the Lord's decisions in our own lives. And even though Solomon's experiment could have failed, it didn't, it could have, the Lord's experiments don't fail. Solomon is immortal. The Lord has way more to offer in the way of help when he's trying to help us discern our testimony and the boundaries of our testimony. He has much more to offer in the way of help, of getting us where we need to go. He has the power to deliver what's best for us. Sometimes he sends trials. Sometimes he allows trials, and he sends and allows this darkness And then we get to the end of the experience, and those dark times become sacred as he helps us work through them. They become sacred because we watched our testimony grow through them. I testify that the Lord loves you and that he knows what he's doing. He knows your heart, but he still brings it to the surface because it helps you see your heart so that you can consciously work on it and consciously walk through these experiences with him. He helps us find the holes and the limits, and he pokes and he prods until we find them so that we can fill them, so that we can broaden our testimonies until the point where our testimonies reach this point where we are completely protected and consistently uplifted. That is what he is pushing us towards. And sending trials and tests helps us find it, helps us find those boundaries so we can expand them. And I say that in the name of Jesus Christ, amen.